Hi, my name is Dan. Welcome to my passage analysis on chapter 11 of My Name is Asher Lev. So I'm first going to read the passage, and then I'm going to get straight into the analysis right afterward. So let's start by reading the passage. My parents arrived by ship on the last day of March. They moved into my uncle's house and lived in the room I had occupied before being transferred to the attic. My father looked rested. He had put on weight and had almost completely lost his limp. Looking at him during those weeks, I often wondered if I, too, would be gray in my early 40s. But he seemed once again strong, and it was clear that he had really needed my mother. We said very little to one another. He was uneasy in my presence. There was now a permanent high wall between us of uncertainty and hostility. My uncle made an effort to pierce that wall the first night my parents were back. He brought my father upstairs to the attic. I was at my desk, reading. They stood in the doorway, looking around at the clutter of drawings and canvases. "I will have to buy him a house," my uncle said, speaking in Yiddish and chewing on a cigar. "Look how he is filling the attic." My father's face was dark. I could see the anger in his eyes. "You are encouraging him." He spoke as if I were not in the room. "I am doing what I think is right." "You give him money for his paint. I did not ask you to give him money." "Arya, do you want your son to steal?" My father looked at him. I could see his lips tighten beneath his graying beard. "Listen to me, Arya. Listen to your brother. Reconcile yourself to your son." My father said nothing. "He is a good boy. He cannot help what he does." "Only an animal cannot help what he does." "Arya!" My father turned and went from the room. There was a heavy silence. My uncle sighed and shook his head. "He is a stubborn man, your father. It is both a weakness and a strength to be so stubborn." Sometime during the intermediate days of Passover, I walked with my mother along the parkway near our apartment house. She looked young and lively, but her eyes were sad. "Jacob Kahn told us in Zurich that you had a fine summer." "Yes." "He succeeded in angering your father." I was quiet. We walked beneath the trees. "It is impossible to talk to your father about you. Hopelessly impossible." She looked at me, and her eyes were moist. "It hurts me to be caught between my husband and my son." I did not know what to say. We walked on and came to the apartment house and stood on the street, looking up at the window of the living room. The Venetian blind had been raised. We could see the houses on the street reflected in the glass of the window. "We think we may give up the apartment," my mother said. "We don't know how long we'll be in Europe. It doesn't seem to make much sense to keep it." We turned and started back to my uncle's house. "Asher, come with us to Europe." "No." "We miss you. I miss you. There are great art schools in Vienna." "No." "Asher, he'll try to take it away from me." "No." She stared. "No," I said. "No." "All right, Asher." "I'm worse than an animal. Asher, please." "He won't take it away from me." All right. Hush. All right." She took my hand. I felt her slender fingers cool and strong against my skin. We walked back together beneath the young spring trees. My uncle urged them not to give up the apartment. Had the Rebbe told my father his position in Europe was permanent? No, the Rebbe had not said that. Then they should keep the apartment. Did they know how difficult it was to acquire a rent-controlled apartment these days? They left for Europe by ship in the third week of April, and I went back to Jacob Kahn. Now, as you could tell, this scene has a lot of characterization with all four of the characters that are shown. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but first I want to talk about how the scene works as a whole and how it functions in the story. Now, I refer to this scene as the turning point. Chapter 11 is more or less in the middle of the book. And at this scene, aka the turning point or the point of no return, however you want to refer to it, it really just establishes how their relationship between Asher and his father is just completely and irreversibly damaged. It uses the word choice to sort of highlight this. For example, in the passage where it says, "We said very little to one another. He was uneasy in my presence. There was now a permanent high wall between us of uncertainty and hostility." The choice of the word permanent there, it really obviously tells you that it's permanent, but you know that it's not just him thinking that it's permanent because of the narrative structure of this book, which is first person past tense. That is the point of view that the book is written in. So we can assume, given that Asher is a reliable narrator, that this is him telling us this story in the future after everything in this book has already happened. So since he says permanent here, we can assume that at the time that he's telling the story, that wall is still there between him and his father. And the damage has been done and there's no going back. There's no repairing this damage. And then at the end of this scene, it says, "They left for Europe by ship in the 3rd week of April, and I went back to Jacob Khan." Basically, it really shows the divide between Asher and his family. Both a physical divide, which shows like the imagery, they're thousands of miles apart. Asher's in New York, and his parents are in Vienna. And then also, obviously, an emotional divide, or just a divide in their relationship. Asher is firmly intent on doing his art, and his father is intent on not accepting this and just sticking to his tradition and like the things that he believes. He does not really want anything to do with his son at this point, and Asher doesn't really want anything to do with his father. Now, I would argue that the two biggest characters in this scene are the mediators. They are the ones who actually do the most talking. And these mediators are Asher's uncle and his mother. Now, Asher's uncle, he is seen in the first half of this scene, and he's mostly trying to get Asher's father to be the one to reconcile himself to Asher. He even says that directly. He says, "Listen to me, Arya. Listen to your brother. Reconcile yourself to your son." Now, he uses this repetition, "Listen to me, Arya. Listen to your brother." It creates this sense of urgency, this importance that Arya needs to be reconciled with Asher. This is just very important, and it needs to be done soon, or else there will be no going back, as we see later in this scene and just later throughout the book. And then at the beginning of the scene, he says, "My uncle made an effort to pierce that wall the first night my parents were back. He brought my father upstairs to the attic. I was at my desk, reading. They stood in the doorway. I looked around at the clutter of drawings and canvases." Here he's trying to basically just show Asher's father a glimpse into Asher's world and how much good he's doing, or at least in Asher's uncle's eyes, this is all good that Asher's doing. But his father is obviously refusing to see it that way, as we see later in the scene and as we see throughout the entire book. But it's highlighted here in this scene. Now, the other mediator is Asher's mother. And rather than really focusing on Arya, though it's really implied that she was trying to get him to do the same thing as like how his uncle was doing, it's implied here where she says it's impossible to talk to him about Asher. It's implied she's trying to get him to be the one to reconcile with Asher, but obviously that hasn't worked. She's been in Vienna with him for months, and obviously that hasn't worked. So now that she's here with Asher, she turns her focus to Asher and tries to get him to be the one to reconcile with his father. She says, "Asher, come with us to Europe." "No." "We miss you. I miss you. There are great art schools in Vienna." "No." She doesn't specifically say, "Come and reconcile yourself with your father." because she knows she's going to be shut down, because Asher is shown to be a very stubborn person throughout this entire novel. So instead she just says, come with us to Europe, and then she appeals to him. She appeals to his pathos, that is his emotions. She says, it pains me to be caught between my husband and my son. And then she later says, I miss you. So she's really trying to appeal to him by saying she misses him, she wants to be with him, she wants the family to be together. She's not specifically saying that everything has to be all good with him and his father, at least not yet. So she doesn't come on too strong, she is not coming out as forceful, but unfortunately this still doesn't work. Because Asher, throughout this conversation, he says, no, 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 I won't. He will try to take it away from me. He won't take it away from me. I won't go with you. And so she ultimately just lets him decide for himself. And that's his decision. And she's like, all right, you can stay. Now, it should be noted that he eventually does try to go to Europe with them, but gets sick and is sent back. And that's in the very next scene that I don't cover here, but that's also just kind of important to note here, that this almost works, but it ends up not working, and that really comes back to the idea that there's no going back from here. It's too late. Nothing that either of them can do. There's nothing that either of them can or will do to mend this broken relationship. In addition to Asher's mother and uncle, there are some parallels between him and his father. And you see these here when Asher's uncle is trying to talk to his father and tell him to be reconciled with Asher. And he just walks away. He doesn't want anything to do with this. Asher does a similar thing, although he can't really walk away because obviously he's walking down the street with his mother. But he just says no. He completely rejects everything she's asking him to do. No, I do not want to be with my father. I do not want to try to reconcile with him right now, because if I do, he will try to take away my passion, and I can't let that happen. So both Asher and his father are established as very stubborn characters, and this sort of comes to a head in this scene, and that's why I call this scene the turning point, because throughout Asher's entire childhood, he has been established as a very stubborn character, and so has his father. And since their wants sort of contradict each other, that is why this relationship is so broken. And neither of them is going to try to reconcile with the other. So this really comes back to the theme of, as I said, permanence. The damage that has been caused to their relationship throughout the entire novel up to this point is now at the point where nothing can be done to save it. They're never going to see eye to eye, and this sort of hints at how the rest of the novel is going to play out, where Asher and his father have an irreversibly just broken relationship. It's never going to be repaired. And the characterization throughout this scene really emphasizes, as I said, the permanence of everything that has happened up to this point. So thank you for watching my analysis of chapter 11 of My Name is Asher Lev. I really hope that you enjoyed and that you learned something from this video.